Hello viewers, I am Dr. Suchitra Gupta, a teacher of English at Government VYT, Pichi Autonomous College, Durg. The college is affiliated to Hemchand Yadav University, Durg. Today I shall be discussing the novel Things Fall Apart, written by Chinua Achebe in the year 1958. In the lecture today, I shall be giving a brief introduction of Chinua Achebe, of Igbo tribe, of the text, Things Fall Apart, a summary of the text, and a critical analysis of Things Fall Apart. Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart forms a part of Paper 4, Unit 4 of Semester 4, English. So now, let's begin with Chinua Achebe, his brief introduction. Chinua Achebe is a Nigerian novelist, poet, professor, and critic. He is one of the leading and the best-known writers of fiction in Black Africa. His novels are read and prescribed in schools and universities all over the English-speaking world. Achebe's novels focus on the traditions of Igbo society, the effect of Christian influences, and the Western and traditional African values during and after colonial era. He relies heavily on the Igbo oral tradition and combines straightforward narration and representation of folk stories, proverbs, and oratory. The main body of Achebe's works rests on the 5 novels: Things Fall Apart, No Longer at Ease, Arrow of God, A Man of the People, and Anthills of Savannah. Things Fall Apart was an immediate success and won for him the Margaret Wrong Prize. He emerged as the doyen of modern African writing in English. No Longer at Ease won for him the Nigerian National Trophy. Arrow of God made him the first recipient of the New Statesman Jock Campbell Award. The 5 novels depict the Nigerian situation in different eras: pre-colonial era in Things Fall Apart, colonial era in Arrow of God, pre-independence era in No Longer at Ease, post-independence era in A Man of the People, and Anthills of Savannah deals with the issues of identity like post-colonial, social, masculine and feminine identity, etc. in Nigeria. Chinua Achebe, there are certain interesting things about Chinua Achebe. Chinua Achebe first enrolled himself to study medicine, but after a year switched to study literature. As a student, he was introduced to the mainstream of the English novel. Besides his rising interest in literature, he also developed interest in the history of Nigeria. This enabled him to express the spirit of his people and write about Africa from the inside. He also became fascinated with the world religions and traditional African culture. Now I come to brief introduction of Igbo tribe. Things Fall Apart is about Igbo culture, life and history. The events of the novel unfold in the 1890s. The Igbo people are an ethnic group native to the present-day Nigeria. They inhabit a very large forest area between Niger and the Cross River. Igbo land is the convenient name given to that large area settled by people who all spoke the same language, Igbo, and shared the same social structure and cultural and religious ideas. Political structure of Igbo tribe is as follows. Igbos did not have well-established centralized institutions and powerful chiefs to constitute a large Igbo tribe, but gradually developed a well-defined tribal consciousness. They were never organized as a nation in the modern political sense. There were no strong rulers. Only rules regulated the social order. As the rules were not rigid and codified, some of them were subject to examination, debate, and change. Things Fall Apart shows how this system worked. Now, some major characteristics of Igbo tribe. The Igbos were a traditional community and were rigid about their traditions. They were intelligent and very fond of discussion, dearly loved the ritual of speech, which was liberally larded with proverbs, and thus were regarded as argumentative people. Their intelligence and capacity for hard work and their high regard for education caused them to spread over Nigeria as traders, teachers, and professional men in the first half of the 20th century. They were peaceful and honest people, but always drove a hard bargain. Their main occupation was agriculture. Now, the religion of the Igbo tribe. Though most of them are now either Christians or agnostics, the traditional religion of Igbo people was one in which there were a great many gods under one god, Chukwu. The priest and priestess interpreted the other world to the mortals. Then there were masked dancers called Igwugwu. It was believed the gods visited this world in the guise of the masked dancers. In a sense, he was a vehicle of God. In addition, each man had a chai or personal god, that is the spiritual other self, part soul, part personal god, and part fate. Theirs was a male-dominated society, and the creative force of their religion was the sun. Now, impact of European arrival on Igbo tribe. With the arrival of the first Europeans in their country, the dilemmas faced by the Igbos were those that confronted many people all over Africa and indeed in the other parts of the world. Their motives were nominally those of bringing light to the dark places of the world, but in reality, their motives were that of trade. Igbos were shaken of their roots. Some took the change in their stride, while there were others who succumbed and lost themselves in circumstances of history over which they had no control. Now I give you a brief introduction of Things Fall Apart. Things Fall Apart, a novel set in pre-colonial Nigeria in 1890s, highlights the fight between the colonizer and the colonized. It was written in 1958. It is a story about a culture on the very verge of change. The novel has 25 short chapters and is divided into 3 parts. Chapters 1 to 13 form part 1 and describes the family and personal history of Okonwo, the customs and society of the Igbo tribes. Part 2 consists of chapters 14 to 19 and part 3 of chapters 20 to 25. These two parts introduce the influence of British colonialism and Christian missionaries on Igbo community. The title of the novel is taken from The Second Coming by the Irish poet W.B. Yeats, in which the poet laments the passing of order and innocence from the world and fears that the changes that are taking place may not be for the best. Now we come to the characters of the novel, a brief introduction to the characters. Firstly, there is Okonwo. He is the protagonist and has 3 wives and 8 children. He is a brave and rash Umofian, a warrior and a clan leader. His life is dominated by fear of failure and of weakness. Then comes Ikwi. I hope I am pronouncing well. Ikwi, she is Okonwo's second wife. Then there is Unoka. Unoka is Okonkwo's father, who lived a life in contrast to typical Igbo masculinity. Okonwo spends his life trying not to become a failure like his father. Then is Nyoi. Nyoi is Okonwo's son. Okonwo is apprehensive of his son as he sees the traces of his father in him. He is one of the early converts to Christianity. Then is Ezinima. She is Okonwo's favorite daughter and she has great resemblance to her father. Then comes Ikemifuna. Ikemifuna is a hostage from Mebano tribe. He is put in the care of Okonwo. Okonwo in fact gets fond of him and even wishes that he were his son. Then Oberika. Oberika is Okonwo's best friend. And last major character is Izudu. He is one of the elders of Umofia and is regarded as a wise man. Now, the summary of the text, Things Fall Apart. Part 1 of the novel introduces us to Umofia. The main concern of part 1 is to give us a detailed picture of the way of life, beliefs, customs, traditions, and social order of the people of Umofia through the character of Okonkwo. Umofia constitutes of a group of 9 related villages in the period just before the arrival of the white man. Umofia means the children of the forest and a land undisturbed by European influences. We learn of their crops, their disputes, the settlement of the disputes, and of their elaborate rituals and ceremonies, their highly formalized modes of address and discussion, of the part played in their lives by superstition and witch doctors. Their society is portrayed as stable, governed by tradition and custom. Every man knew his place and subscribed to a generally accepted system of belief. Okonwo is a man of the old order. He is projected as tall, muscular, and fierce, having a fierce personality. The flawed idea of masculinity, as understood and followed by the Igbo tribe, defines the life of Okonkwo. His life is dominated primarily by 2 things: the fear of failure and weakness, and second, his quest to establish himself as one of the greatest men of his clan. He wants to dispel his father Onoka's tainted legacy of being effeminate and cowardly. At age of 18, he won a wrestling match, and since that victory, his reputation has grown and increased. He is always stern with his 3 wives and children. His son Nioi is a disappointment to him, and he sees in him an image of his father. Okonkwo is made the leader of his village. He is selected by the elders to be the guardian of Ikemifuna, a hostage of the village. Okonkwo, though gradually grows fond of him, refuses to show any affection because that would show his weakness. Then, the oracle of Umofia eventually pronounces that the boy must be killed. Ignoring Ziudu's advice, he kills Okonwo kills the boy himself to avoid seeming weak and feminine. The climax of part 1 comes in chapter 13. During a gun salute at Ziudu's funeral, a gunshot from Okonwo's gun accidentally kills Ziudu's son. Okonwo, with his family, is sent to exile for 7 years to his mother's village, Mebanta. So part 1 ends with Okonkwo leaving to Mebanta, thereby bringing an abrupt end to his settled and successful life in Umofia. Part 2 of the novel covers Okonwo's years of exile in Mebanta. During his exile, Oberika, a friend of Okonwo, informs him of the arrival of the white man in one of the villages, the killing of the white man by the tribesmen, and the white man's vengeance by massacring the villagers. The village is forced to respond with either appeasement or resistance to the imposition of the white man's society. The spread of Christianity threatens the peace of the land, and this leads to the establishment of courts and the white man's rule of law and order. Everything Okonwo believed in and the society in which he held an honorable place is threatened. A great feast is given by him for his kinsmen before leaving Mebanta. It is a final demonstration of the traditional way of life of the Igbo tribe. Part 3 of the novel brings the final tragic phase of Okonwo's story. Returning from his exile, Okonwo finds his village changed by the presence of the white man. A court, a mission school, and a hospital has been established. All over Umofia, there is great unrest and conflict of cultures. The unmasking of Igwu during a traditional ceremony leads to the burning of the mission church by the tribes. Okonwo, with his associates, is arrested, fined, and humiliated by the police. Okonwo, a warrior by nature and an adamant traditionalist, despises any of cowardice and advocates war. But Okonwo eventually realizes that the people of Umofia are not going to fight to protect themselves. Things now fall apart, and Okonwo succumbs to the colonial pressure. When the local leader of the white man comes to Okonwo to take Okonwo to court, he finds that Okonwo has hanged himself to a tree. He ultimately commits suicide rather than be tried in a colonial court. Among his own people, Okonwo's action has ruined his reputation and status, as it is strictly against the teachings of Igbo tradition. Since suicide is an offense against the gods, it is not permitted for his fellow tribesmen to bring him down and bury him or even to touch him. In Okonwo's epitaph, Obrika laments the sad end of Okonwo. Obrika, explaining Igbo culture to the district commissioner, asks for his assistance to perform the funeral of Okonwo. Then, though not quite understanding the culture, the commissioner leaves the place promising help. As he departs, he congratulates himself for adding to his knowledge African customs and beliefs. Now I'll do a brief critical analysis of the text The Things Fall Apart. The novel's ending is dark and ironic. The district commissioner is a pompous little man who thinks that he understands indigenous African culture. Achebe uses the commissioner to demonstrate the inaccuracy of accounts of Africa given by the colonists. Whereas Achebe has written a whole book on Okonwo, he suggests that European account of Okonwo would likely portray him as a cultureless savage who senselessly killed a messenger. Things Fall Apart is a milestone in African literature. It has come to be seen as the archetypal modern African novel in English. Achebe is now considered as an essential novelist on African identity, nationalism, and decolonization. Before Things Fall Apart was published, Europeans had written most novels about Africa, and they largely portrayed Africans as savage. Achebe broke apart this view by portraying Igbo society from the perspective of the tribe, which allows the reader to examine the effects of European colonization from a different perspective. The neutral narration of Achebe has given the novel a realistic texture. It is indeed a classic study of cross-cultural misunderstanding and consequences to the rest of humanity when a belligerent culture or civilization, out of sheer arrogance, takes it upon itself to invade another culture, another civilization. Although Achebe favors the African culture of the pre-Western society, he attributes its destruction to the weakness within the native structure. The language of the novel has also been a major factor in the emergence of the modern African novel. Achebe wrote in English, portrayed Igbo life from the point of view of an African man, and used the language of his people. Subsequently, he was able to greatly influence African novelists.